They say weddings bring people together. I used to believe that. Used to believe in a lot of things, like second chances, clean slates, and the idea that love could fix what life broke. I believed it enough to propose again, 10 years after my first marriage fell apart. Her name was Andrea. She came into my life like a breeze through an open window. Cool, refreshing, unexpected. I met her in a bookstore, of all places. I was in the parenting aisle, flipping through something about raising teenage boys, and she was on the other side of the shelf looking at cookbooks. We struck up a conversation over dinner ideas and somehow ended up talking for 3 hours on the sidewalk outside. At the time, it felt like fate. I'd been a single father for 5 years. My son, Josh, was 9 when my first wife left. She said she needed to find herself, which apparently meant a yoga instructor named Zane in Santa Fe. I never badmouthed her to Josh, even when it hurt. I figured he'd grow up and figure it out on his own. And he did. He's 17 now, smart, loyal, funny in a dry, understated way. He's got this quiet strength about him. He reminds me of my mother, actually, and apparently my ex-wife. That last part matters more than I ever thought it would. Andrea met Josh 6 months into our relationship. She was kind to him, polite even, but there was always something just a touch off. Like she was trying too hard to be effortless. She'd smile, but it never quite reached her eyes when she looked at him. When he'd mention his mom, Andrea would subtly steer the conversation elsewhere, like she didn't want that name said in her house. I noticed it, sure, but I chalked it up to awkwardness. Maybe she was still adjusting. Maybe she didn't want to step on toes. I rationalized it all, because love has a way of blurring red flags into pink ones. The proposal came after 1.5 years. Candlelight dinner. Her favorite restaurant. I gave her my mother's ring, an heirloom I'd been holding on to, waiting for something real. She cried when I asked. Said yes. Said she'd never felt so sure of anything in her life. And I believed her. That night, we talked about the wedding. Her eyes lit up like it was a movie playing behind them. She wanted a garden venue, live music, string lights, a summer evening. I told her whatever she wanted, I'd make it happen. I meant it. The next morning, she had a wedding planning spreadsheet started. She's a planner, Andrea. Type A down to the bone. There were tabs for vendors, colors, seating charts, even a vibe board, which I didn't even know was a thing. I let her run with it. I liked seeing her happy. But about 3 weeks into planning, something shifted. We were having breakfast. Josh was still asleep upstairs, and Andrea casually said, "So I've been thinking about the guest list." "Okay," I said, pouring her more coffee. "What's up?" "Well, I was wondering if it might be better if Josh didn't come." I actually laughed. I thought it was a joke, but she didn't laugh with me. "I'm serious," she said, eyes steady on mine. "It's not a kid-friendly event, and he's almost 18. He'll understand." "Understand what?" I asked, my voice already tight. "That he's not welcome at his own father's wedding?" "It's not like that," she said quickly. "It's just, he reminds me so much of her. His mother. The way he talks, the way he looks. It's like she's haunting the room whenever he's around." I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. I just stared at the woman I was supposed to marry, wondering how she could say something so cruel and so calm in the same breath. "Andrea," I finally said, "he's my son." "I know," she said, "but he's not ours. This day is supposed to be about us. I just don't want anything to ruin it." I set my coffee down and pushed back from the table. She looked frustrated then, like I was the one being unreasonable. "He's a reminder of a life you had before me," she said, quieter now. "Of her. I want this to be a new beginning." "By pretending the past doesn't exist?" I asked. "By excluding the most important person in my life?" "It's one day," she said. "He'll forgive you." I didn't answer. I just left the room. That night, I sat with Josh in the backyard, just the two of us. We didn't talk about what she said. I didn't tell him he wasn't wanted there. I couldn't. Instead, we talked about college applications and the movie he wanted to see that weekend. But the whole time, my heart was pounding. A war inside me, between the future I thought I was building and the foundation I'd already laid with my son. I slept on the couch that night. Told Andrea I had a migraine. She didn't press. Maybe she thought it would blow over. Maybe she thought I'd fold. But something in me cracked open. Something old and fierce. A part of me that had been quiet for too long. I spent the next 3 days thinking, remembering. I remembered the first time I held Josh in the hospital, how tiny his hand looked wrapped around my finger. I remembered the nights I stayed up with him after the divorce, telling him bedtime stories even though he was too old for them, because I needed them more than he did. I remembered every moment I promised I'd never let anything hurt him again. And then I remembered Andrea's words, "He'll forgive you." That was when I made the decision. I wouldn't ask my son to forgive me for something I had the power to prevent. So I changed the venue. And the bride. I didn't tell her right away. For a few days, I played along, nodding when she talked about floral arrangements, letting her taste test cakes while I quietly let mine go stale. She thought I was just overwhelmed with wedding stress. In a way, she was right. But the real stress wasn't about the color of the napkins or the playlist. It was about standing at the altar without my son beside me. You don't get a lot of moments in life where clarity comes all at once. Usually it sneaks up on you. But that morning, watching Josh spread peanut butter on toast in his mismatched socks, humming some old Fleetwood Mac song, it hit me like a brick. He was the constant. Through everything. Every version of me. Divorced, broke, rebuilding. He was the only person who never left. And if the woman I was about to marry couldn't understand that, then maybe she didn't understand me at all. So I started making calls. First to the venue. Some estate with white columns and fountains and a six-figure minimum. I told them we were canceling. They hit me with the contract fine print and the fees, but I didn't blink. Some costs aren't worth calculating. Then I called an old friend, Will. He runs a bed and breakfast out near the lake. Nothing fancy, just a barn-turned event space with string lights and wildflowers. I helped him fix up the place years ago, back when my hands still had calluses. He said he could clear the date. Said he'd be honored. That was the easy part. The hard part came next, facing Andrea. I waited until we were sitting across from each other on a Sunday afternoon. She had her laptop open, tabs full of wedding to-do lists and Pinterest boards. I'd seen her look at that screen more in the last month than she looked at me. "I need to talk to you," I said. She didn't look up. "Can it wait?" The bakery just emailed back. "It can't," I said. My voice must have caught her attention, because she paused and finally looked at me. "I've canceled the wedding." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. She blinked once, twice. "What?" "I canceled the venue. Called off the vendors. The whole thing." She stared at me, stunned. "Why?" "You know why." She set her laptop down slowly, like she didn't trust her hands not to throw it. "Because of him." "Don't call him that." She scoffed. "Unbelievable. After everything I've planned? After everything we've spent?" "And after everything he and I have been through," I said. "You asked me to cut him out of the most important day of my life. Not because he's done anything wrong, but because he looks like someone you don't like." "It's not about that," she snapped. "It's about starting fresh." "No," I said calmly. "It's about you wanting to erase a part of me, and I'm not going to let you." She stood up then, pushing her chair back with a scrape. "So that's it? You're just throwing this all away?" I shook my head. "No, I'm choosing something better." That was the last real conversation we had. She moved out 2 days later, said I'd embarrassed her, wasted her time. Maybe I did. Or maybe I just woke up a little too late. The thing about weddings is, they're not just about two people. They're about everything those people bring with them. Their pasts, their scars, their families, the ones who show up and the ones who never did. And I wasn't ashamed of mine. Not anymore. I sent out new invitations. Nothing engraved. Just a simple card, printed at the local shop. It read, "Change of plans. Same groom. Different path." We held the new wedding a month later. Under the open sky, surrounded by people who actually knew me. Who actually cared. Josh stood beside me as my best man. No tux. Just a crisp white shirt and the same quiet smile he wore when he was a kid handing me Father's Day cards made out of construction paper. Before the ceremony, I pulled him aside. Told him the truth, that none of it would have made sense without him there. He hugged me tight, and I swear I felt a decade of weight lift off my chest. As for the bride, well, that's another story. But let's just say fate has a strange sense of timing. And she wasn't Andrea. She showed up late. I was standing under the old oak tree where we'd set up the ceremony. The folding chairs were filling up. Friends, family, people who'd seen the mess and still chose to be here. Josh stood beside me, calm as ever, quietly patting my shoulder every time he sensed my nerves spiking. And I'll admit, I was nervous. Not because I doubted the decision, but because it felt so far from where I started. A month ago, I was planning a lavish wedding with a woman who saw my son as a shadow she couldn't erase. Now I was barefoot in a field, waiting for someone who made me feel like every scar was a story worth telling. Her name was Claire. She and I had crossed paths years ago, just briefly. We met at a fundraiser I barely remember, something for the local school board. I was there as a favor to a friend, and she was working the event, volunteering, making everyone feel like they belonged. That's who Claire is, soft-spoken but steady. The kind of woman who remembers birthdays without Facebook and sends handwritten thank you notes. She and I reconnected a few weeks after Andrea left. I ran into her at the grocery store. Josh was with me. We were arguing over cereal, laughing about it. She saw us in the aisle and smiled, and something about her presence just settled me. We got coffee, then dinner, then silence, long, comfortable ones that didn't need to be filled. When I told her what had happened, about the canceled wedding, the reason for it, she didn't flinch. She looked me in the eye and said, "If someone asks you to choose between them and your child, you already have the answer." I knew then. And now here we were. The music started. Just a soft acoustic guitar, playing a song neither of us had chosen from a list. Just something Will's niece offered to play. And there she was, Claire. She didn't wear a traditional gown. No veil. No frills. Just a simple cream-colored dress that flowed with the wind and looked like it had been waiting its whole life for this day. Josh smiled when he saw her. That meant everything to me. She walked toward me slow, steady, her eyes locked on mine. And in that moment, everything Andrea had said, all her fears, her possessiveness, her control, it all dissolved. I didn't just feel chosen. I felt seen. The ceremony wasn't long. Will officiated. He cracked a few jokes. Josh read a poem he'd written. Something about seasons and roots and finding home in unexpected places. It brought tears to more than just my eyes. When it was time for vows, Claire took my hands and said, "I'm not here to erase your past. I'm here to stand beside it, to learn it, to love it. Every chapter, including the ones that broke you." I didn't need to memorize my vows. I just looked at her and said, "You're not my second choice. You're my first piece." We kissed. People clapped. Josh hooped a little too loud and pretended to be embarrassed after. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. The reception was just picnic tables under the stars. We ate fried chicken and drank lemonade and danced barefoot in the grass. No drama. No speeches filled with pretense. Just laughter. Real, rooted laughter. At one point, I saw Josh sitting with Claire, deep in conversation. She was laughing at something he said, and he looked relaxed, at ease. I stood back for a moment, just watching them. My heart felt like it had room to breathe again. He had accepted her. More than that, he liked her. And she didn't just tolerate him. She embraced him. As part of me. As someone she was proud to call family. Later that night, long after the cake had been cut and the last song had played, Claire and I sat by the lake, the water still and dark like ink. "I never thought I'd get married like this," I said. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Me neither. But I'm glad it's you." She squeezed my hand. "Me too." And that was it. No fireworks. No dramatic twist. Just quiet contentment. The kind I used to think was boring, but now understand is the most precious thing in the world. Some people measure love in grand gestures and flawless timelines. But I think real love looks more like this. A canceled wedding, a reclaimed vow, a son who never needed to be sacrificed for someone else's comfort, and a bride who showed up late, but right on time.